r/am I the whole stories. AITA for potentially traumatizing my neighbor's children after they kept coming onto my property and trying to get into my house. Me and my now fiancé have lived in this house and neighborhood for a few months now. I have a 1-year-old son myself, so I know how kids can be. However, my neighbors have 3 children. A 9, 12, and 14-year-old. All of them are boys. At first they weren't too much trouble. I would just see them running around, throwing sticks, riding scooters across the street. But as of recently they had started getting a lot closer to my property. This all started with the oldest one throwing various trash into her yard that my fiancé would continually have to pick up. Then, all 3 children started digging holes in our yard, banging on the door, and I even caught them trying to lockpick my front door with a bobby pin. This had happened 4 to 5 times already. Of course, I brought this up to their mother, who has done little about it. They seem to have very little supervision, and apparently CPS had already been called numerous of times because of how often they seem to be left alone. I warned the mother that we have 2 big dogs, whose sole purpose was to protect against intruders. So if their sons happened to actually get into my house, they would probably end up hurt. I did not want these little children to end up hurt, of course, which was why I was warning her. She brushed it off, saying if anything happened to her boys she would have me promptly arrested and my dogs put down. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands, to ensure the safety of these boys. As expected, the oldest one and his brothers were sneaking around my yard again. I waited until they got closer to the front door. When the second youngest opened the door, I said a command to my dogs and they immediately ran out, barking and growling. All the boys screamed and started yelling. They ran and ran all the way until they got to their house, getting wet by the lawn sprinklers on the way. I called my dogs back. They stopped at the end of the lawn like I had trained them to, and we didn't hear much for a few days. Their mother and the police came knocking at the door. She said some stuff about how my dogs bit her children and I was a danger to the neighbors. But I showed the security footage from my camera to the police and it pretty much died down from there. She's still trying to keep the case open, but I feel as if I've done little to no wrong. Her boys don't bother us anymore, and her children aren't hurt and were never going to be. AITA. Edit. I did tell the police that they were attempting to break into my house. It was obvious from the video too. I just decided not to press charges, considering the only reason they're acting like this is because they have a neglectful mother. From your comments, I've decided to do all I can to get those boys out of there. Lol. For those of you saying my dogs are aggressive, Mabel can't sleep unless she chews on her stuffy repeatedly and Robbie is scared of spoons. Now for the top comments. NTA. They were trespassing and harassing you. Their mother is useless. Now you should take the footage back to the police and say you'd like to press charges for breaking and entering, trespassing, etc. No way should those kids get away with it scot-free. There were these kids who lived across the hall from us at our old apartments. They would spend entire days knocking on ours and everyone else's doors non-stop and running away. People tried to ask the parents to get them to stop, because most of us were working from home, and having kids banging and kicking on our doors every 5 seconds when we didn't open the door for their prank was not flying. They did nothing. Half the time the kids would be doing this, and the dad would be standing outside smoking, just watching them. Saying nothing. So finally complaints started getting sent into the apartments and they started getting warnings. It all came to a head when, one day, someone caught the boys breaking into their apartment. They got to the living room and almost got shot, and completely destroyed the door trying to get in. Luckily the owner caught themselves before a tragedy ensued, but the cops got called and they were served an eviction notice the next day. The parents were telling me how unfair it was, because they had nowhere else to go except their parents' place. And I'm just like, okay? This wouldn't be a problem if either of you had ever actually bothered to parent your kids. But, bummer, I guess. NTA op. If your kids break into my house, I have 2 big dogs that will chase them. Neighbor whatever. They can't hurt my kids. Kid break into house and 2 large dogs chase them. Neighbor shocked Pikachu face. Nothing wrong with defending your property from trespassers. Your dogs were just doing their job. Now for the next story. AITA for not letting my ex-husband have my deceased daughter's ashes? I'm an Indian woman who came to the United States on a student's visa and met my ex-husband Dean. My family wasn't happy about the relationship but eventually relented when they realized we were serious about each other. I got pregnant a few months into our marriage and gave birth to our daughter Asha. After I gave birth I developed PPD and as a result our marriage suffered and never really recovered. I was on antidepressants. 2 years after her birth my ex-husband got close to his coworker Laura and they began a 2-year torrid affair. When he eventually got caught, he apologized for hurting my feelings but claimed he was in love with Laura. We divorced and I was left in the US all alone without any emotional or family support. The divorce happened in 2017. We shared 50-50 custody of Asha. In the February 2020, I decided to visit my family in India as my extended family had never met my daughter. The original plan was to stay in India for 3 months, but the plans changed as the world got locked down. One day my daughter complained of uneasiness and stomach pain after she had her usual lunch. I gave her a digestive enzyme and asked her to rest. When I went to check in on her an hour later she was gone. I still don't know what happened that day, but after that moment everything was a blur. My sister informed my ex-husband but because borders were shut he couldn't come to India for the rituals. I cremated my girl according to Hindu rituals and later immersed her ashes in the Ganges, as per our customs. I have refused to take any calls from ex in the past 1 year. I am still dealing with grief. My ex has reached out to me and wants my address to get some of her ashes. I let my sister convey to him that the ashes have been disposed of as per customs. He is now furious and wants me to come back to the United States and give him some of her toys. I have planned on never going back. He already has some of her clothes and toys. I refuse to directly talk to him. That part of my life is over and done. AITA? To answer a few questions. 1. We were told she suffered a cardiac arrest. She was already dead when she was brought to the nearest hospital. My ex was sent all the details and the hospital documents. 2. He and his family were sent the Zoom link for the funeral. 3. He already has half of her belongings. 4. I didn't keep her ashes, it was disposed of the day after the cremation in the Ganges as per Hindu religious beliefs. 5. He was informed of all the rituals that were going to take place beforehand, he probably didn't understand them. 6. No, I wasn't in contact with him, my family was. 7. The reason he had no problem with me taking Asha to India was because in 2019 he took her to Russia to meet his grandparents. 8. When we left for India, it was early February, we didn't realize COVID was going to be a global pandemic. 9. My ex's heritage is Russian Jewish. He didn't follow his religion when we were married and I raised her Hindu. I realize that people believe I'm the asshole. I understand and accept the judgment. I didn't ask for advice, and no, I'm not going to talk to him ever again. We are done. He can hate me. I don't care. Since he didn't get to be with her in her last days, Lil be sending him a pair of her shoes that she wore during her India visit. My family will contact him regarding the same. Me not talking to him personally is nothing out of the normal. Even when Asha was alive, I kept communication to what the court stipulated. No chit-chat, no weather talk. It was just business. We communicated via email. I have no reason to talk to him now. People can call this being vindictive, I call this my boundary. Now for the top comments. You are dealing with a lot and I don't think this sub is the place for you right now. That said, you asked, and AITA. I understand you're grieving the loss of your daughter, but so is your ex. You say what happened to Asha on the day she got sick is a mystery to you and you were there. Imagine how he feels that he saw his daughter off on what was supposed to be a 3-month vacation, is then told she is dead, is then told her remains have been disposed of, and can't even get you to talk to him. If I were him, I would half suspect that Asha is still alive and the whole thing is a ruse to cut her off from him. Please consider talking directly to him. It may not be as painful as you are anticipating. In fact, it may help you to grieve with the one other person who can understand how it feels to have lost your daughter. Imagine your young daughter travels overseas with her mother, your ex. One day, your former sister-in-law contacts you and tells you your daughter died under mysterious circumstances. You're grief-stricken, naturally. You loved your daughter and cannot even travel to see her remains. You ask for some of her ashes only to be told they've been disposed of. You were not informed in advance of how your daughter's remains would be dealt with, you weren't asked for any input or even allowed to watch via phone her ashes being scattered. So you ask for some of the toys she played with during her last days only to be told no again. What must that feel like? Op is being cruel. We might be getting a glimpse at why her husband left her for another woman. AITA, he is her father, he was an active part of her life. You are being vindictive. His affair has nothing to do with him being a father and wanting to have part of his daughter. I hope you can live with yourself for being so horrible to a grieving parent. You had no right to unilaterally decide what to do with her remains, your customs don't override his, you should have given him half of the ashes. I have lived for several years in India and attended a few Hindu funerals. I'm not sure why Op didn't point this out in her post, maybe she's actually a troll, I don't know, but in India ashes are not preserved at home. They are treated as human remains and have to be scattered immediately after cremation. The funeral is held afterwards, with a picture of the deceased. My late colleague's wife tried to keep a small amount for herself and wasn't allowed. This was in northern India 5 years ago. Naturally, people from a culture where ashes are kept will be outraged, but I doubt Op could have saved the ashes even if she had wanted to. Now for the next story. AITA for working against husband's wishes. I, 23F, and my husband, 22 meters, had a kid back in March. I ended up staying on maternity leave longer than expected due to labor complications and ended up having to have a surgery weeks after that. We had saved up a bit of money to ease the financial burden, but we ended up running out of money not long after the surgery. Due to unmentionable circumstances at my previous cushy job, I ended up quitting before going back. Personally, I would have liked to stay at home, but we just couldn't afford it. So I ended up taking a lesser paying job, which honestly has ended up being a blast. While my baby is being taken care of by Aunt, for free at Aunt's own request. I drop her off at 8 a.m. and my husband would get her at 4 p.m. Then would watch her until I get home at 5 p.m. He cooks dinner for us while I take care of the baby. We eat and I put baby to bed at 8 p.m. Now my job has the option of overtime, where I previously worked 8A 5p, now is 8A 10p, after lots of debate we agreed. So I took it. That's a whole 5 hours of overtime every day. 6 when I don't take lunch and just eat at work. I figured I could use the extra money to save up to not work for December so I can visit my family who live far away and get some Christmas presents. Or to help my sister, who just uprooted her life to come live with us, until she gets a job. The first day was a disaster. The baby wouldn't stop crying, which is very weird. BC baby is very mild-mannered, so my husband couldn't cook. And he called the aunt to help with the baby. We decided he could cook then get the baby after bring my dinner to my work down the road. Day 2 he does just that, cooks and brings me food and gets baby at 8 p.m. Again the baby won't stop crying until he calls the aunt to help. So now he is demanding I don't work overtime because it's too hard on him to keep the house clean and take care of baby without me. To be honest, I didn't take it well. I straight up ignored his request. I had been doing most of the stuff by myself, so why can't he? Am I the a-hole for ignoring his request? Update: this will have me working every day 8 to 10 p besides Wednesday, for family dinner, and Sunday, my off day. Also overtime isn't even always available, only if a farmer is cutting for my office. I have offered to bring my own dinner, noodles, but my husband refuses to let me. He says I must get a fresh proper meal. I still go home and clean the house and take care of baby all night and in morning by myself. We all get up at 5 a.m., baby included, and spend time together while getting ready to go to work. My husband still gets to go home and either sleep or play video games until he starts dinner at 6 to 7. Which he cooks BC he loves to cook. Also husband won't let me switch to a higher paying job where he works, getting paid 22 an hour where I get 12, because it's a labor job BC I must have a desk job. And this one is the only one close. Now for the top comments. Honestly, this sounds like a terrible setup. You're gone 14 hours a day 5 days a week, plus another 9-hour day. And a large motivating factor is so you can save up for Christmas presents? That's not a good enough reason. Help your sister find work, but this arrangement is bonkers. This work schedule is not conducive to having any sort of family life. Your husband may be overwhelmed since he's now effectively single parenting since you're gone well past when the baby is in bed. And he's still supposed to cook and deliver food for you? So now, instead of your baby being in bed at 8 p.m., he can't pick her up until 8 p.m. so that he can cook a meal and drop it off for you. So, she's getting to bed later than normal and your husband is running around cooking and delivering food after work. I honestly don't understand what you were thinking here. AITA saw you edit that you would totally pack your own dinner but your husband insists on bringing you a fresh meal. I mean, are you too serious? Your baby is spending 12 hours with your aunt so your husband can cook you a fresh meal and drop it off. Why can't you say actually, I think it's better for you to take care of the baby. I can fend for myself? And where the hell is your sister in all of this? She's apparently living with you, but can't help with the baby in the evenings? Even though you say you're working in part to help her? Edit 2. Op has disclosed that her husband does absolutely no childcare and this was really just a way to try to force him to step up. Even still, he's found a way to not step up. Op is really only being an aunt to herself by putting herself through this. Now for the top comments. He's still not doing much and Op is spending too much time away from her baby. I agree with this 100%. AITA, it sounds like you made a unilateral decision without consulting your husband. On top of that, it's not about money, it's about quality of life. Are you sure you weren't just trying to escape motherhood with more time at work? AITA. This should have been planned out a whole lot better. Your baby is with the unpaid, and from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.? WTH? You guys didn't put together a plan for batch cooking on the weekend so food was already prepared for the week? You are gone from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.? I get that the money is nice but you have a 6-month-old. Have you considered compromising and working odd a couple of days week versus every day? Now for the next story. AITA for siding with my wife when she refused to let my son install the lock his mom got him for his room? I married my current wife 6 years ago. She has a 14-year-old son and I have a 16-year-old son from my previous marriage. We normally don't deal with a ton of issues as a blended family. My stepson Joshua is nice to everyone and likes sharing a lot, it's his way of forming strong bonds. My son Scotty, however, is the complete opposite. He hates sharing and is very private. He takes offense to his brother going into his room and borrowing stuff from him. He hates that Joshua does it frequently but my wife and I thought it was completely normal as long as Joshua returns everything later. Scotty started complaining about it openly lately saying Joshua has gone too far with his behavior taking stuff constantly without permission. My wife and I came up with a solution which was getting Scotty a safe to store his valuable possessions but Scotty said this wasn't enough since he has tons of stuff and can't put it all in a safe. It all came to head last week when Joshua took Scotty's Lego collection to take pictures of it outside the house and accidentally broke a couple of pieces. Scotty blew up and got his mom involved. My ex-wife then bought and sent him a lock to install in his bedroom door the same day which got my wife go mad calling her disrespectful and overstepping to send locks over to her house. They had a verbal fight on the phone and I returned home to see my wife arguing with Scotty after he refused to return the lock. I asked what the heck was going on and my wife said Scotty was expecting her to let him install the lock his mom sent to her house. She said neither boys is allowed to have locks. Scotty said he was done with Joshua taking and breaking his stuff and begged me to say something, convince my wife to let him keep the lock but I told him my wife was right and that it was disrespectful of his mom to send a lock to our house. Scotty said if we're so against his mom getting him a lock then I should get him one instead but I refused since my wife said neither boys are allowed a lock so it's not like Joshua has a lock and Scotty doesn't. Scotty threw a fit calling me terrible and that he can't wait to move out and be done with our nonsense. We had Joshua apologize but still Scotty isn't having it. My former in-laws argued that I was being unfair to Scotty after he complained to them and told me to let him keep the lock and no side with my wife and her son. AITA. Now for the top comments. Yes, AITA. I have news for you. Joshua is not nice to everyone. Being nice includes respecting others' belongings and their privacy, and he is not doing that with your son. He invades Scotty's privacy, takes his stuff without permission, and apparently damages some of it. That's not sharing, FFS, that is taking without permission. We have a word for that, and it's not sharing. You are the problem here. You do nothing to correct Joshua's bad behavior or support Scotty in setting entirely reasonable boundaries for his privacy. You obviously favor your stepson, and have zero respect for Scotty's need for privacy and security that his things belong to him. Your ex was right on to send him a lock. Thank goodness she is looking out for his concerns, since you won't and your wife doesn't think it matters. AITA. Poor Scotty, no privacy and one parent who doesn't stand up for him. If I was him I'd move out. AITA. You in 10 years' time, why did Scotty never call me? He won't go low contact over a lock. It's about how his dad didn't protect him from his thieving snake of a brother and respect his rights or have his back. These things are in the dad job description. You will have irreparably damaged the relationship by putting your wife first when Scotty is the victim. He will not trust or respect you. So your wife has a rule about no locks, but stealing is okay. I can see where Joshua got his morals from. Maybe she doesn't want Scotty to have a lock so her thief son can still steal from your son. You're so obviously the asshole that I'm wondering if this is a made-up post. If yes, then bravo. This is a convincing post. AITA, but not about the locks. You're a knob because you're favoring your stepson, who clearly needs to learn to respect his brother's boundaries and his wholly justified opinions on what happens to his stuff, over your bio son. Joshua is absolutely in the wrong here. You haven't disclosed that he's got any diagnoses which might explain why he thinks it's okay to take things without asking, so I'm going to assume there are none. And, to be clear, that's what he does, he takes things without asking. Indeed, he takes things without asking and he knows it bothers his brother when he does so. Yet, he does it anyway. In short, Joshua's an a. Joshua isn't sharing when he takes his brother's toys without permission. He's not sharing when he goes into his brother's room without permission, either. He's certainly not sharing when he breaks things he shouldn't be touching in the first place. Having him apologize does not solve the problem. Joshua is 16-14 and more than old enough to know better. That he doesn't suggest that you have failed him as parents. Scotty, your older son, is also old enough to know right from wrong and know that he's being unfairly treated here. He has, by your own admission, repeatedly tried to address Joshua's trespasses with you. But you've ignored it. By ignoring it, Joshua's escalated and damaged things Scotty holds dear. Your solution, the safe? No solution at all. IT does not solve the problem of Joshua going into someone else's private space and taking things. At best, it prevents Joshua from taking a small subset of things when he finds himself in someone else's room. This is bad parenting. Full stop. Your ex-wife does not live in your home, but she sees this for what it is, Joshua's continued invasion of Scotty's privacy while you twiddle your thumbs and pretend Scotty is the problem. And then, you have the nerve to get up in high dudgeon because your ex-wife did the most logical thing she could under the circumstances? All things being equal, her move wouldn't have been necessary had you simply told Joshua to stay out of rooms that aren't his without permission. And enforced it. AITA. Your wife's an a. Joshua is an a. Be a better father to both of your children, because you're failing both of them in different ways. Well, that's all for the video today. I hope you enjoyed it and as always have an amazing day.